In what other contexts and how did you engage with language that presented Portuguese for you in English and French and not Igbo? And I noticed you haven't said Igala much.
I would have an accent at home and then another accent at school. At home I would have my big Portuguese accent and then at school I would have my local accent because I would be with my friends. I did not feel the need of having to make the accent for my friends.
How you engage in those is going to the market, school, boarding school. It's a big one where you come out having a whole different language.
Having the market was definitely not the favorite one.
With French, I think it was just in school and with my siblings because my parents don't speak. That's why it was also very hard for me to even sustain that. Moving from home and being in an environment where everybody just speaks English forced me to learn more like English. Because once I moved out of French, it's not popular in Nigeria. Once I moved out of that, it was like, oh, like you don't speak English. That kind of forced me to leave that on the side and just continue with English.
There aren't a lot of spaces outside of French schools in Nigeria where people speak French, where you can interact. But English is more widely spoken. I'm assuming that Portuguese is just more widely spoken, even on the streets in Mozambique.
Especially in my region. But for the case of the capital, it's a little bit different because the capital shares borders with South Africa and Eswatini, two countries who have English as their official languages. I'm from the north. My province is called Nampula.
Do you think your experience is representative of most people's experiences where you grew up, or is that unique?
I feel like my experience is not very similar to others or my peers. Most kids in Abuja grow up speaking English, both having second or third languages, because a lot of people speak 3 languages or more than that. But the main language that they speak growing up is English, and maybe one of the 3 main languages as well.
So that would be Igbo,
Hausa, and Yoruba. Well, Hausa a lot more.
Definitely within my country, I don't think we all got to share the same experience. There's people who do speak the traditional language and there's people who don't. And I'm talking about this in the context of my friend group.
You're saying not enough of them speak the indigenous language?
Yes, not enough. But also there's some that they
Remind me what you called it again.
Makwa.
Makwa. So not enough of people in your social network speak Makwa. Why do you think that's the case? Do you think it's for the same reason that you don't?
Yes, but also it's because most people in my province, they come from another provinces and they moved to mine. They do speak the language, the traditional language of the province where they were born. They just don't speak the one from my province.
So I would want to think that maybe this would be similar to, if you go back to the Nigerian context, Lagos is a cosmopolitan context, for instance, although it's in the Yoruba-speaking region. But many people who live in Lagos don't speak Yoruba because we don't need to speak Yoruba. You either speak English or Pidgin or whatever language you come with, and you'll find enough people in Lagos that will speak. I don't know if you learn much Nigerian history in school. No, depending on which school you go to, you'll likely learn more history of that. So if you go to a French school, maybe you'll get a healthy dose of Charles de Gaulle, but not about your own ancestors. You go to an American school, then George Washington and Abraham Lincoln more than anybody else. Imagine, for instance, that you had the opportunity to learn not just your indigenous language, Makwa, Igala, Igbo, but that you had to use those in schools to learn all subjects. Do you think that would be feasible?
I think it would be feasible. Back at home, there are churches that have masses in the traditional language.
In Abuja, I don't know if that would be feasible. I feel like you have to grow up in an actual state where they speak mainly that particular language, whether that's a city, Lagos or Abuja.
Let's imagine, for instance, that you grew up in an Igala speaking.
Yeah, it would be feasible.
So, do you think that schools could easily teach different subjects using Igala, or in, say, Enugu or Anambra, teaching every subject in Igbo? Do you think they do that?
I think they do that. Did they not do that?
Sorry to disappoint you. The policy says they should use the indigenous language for the first 3 years, and then they will switch to English. The experience is that they usually start with English from day one, even in kindergarten. I've been in many schools across that region, and I've not seen one where the language of instruction to teach math, chemistry, biology, history
is
Igbo. No, it's always English. Really, even from very early in schooling. The only subject where Igbo is the language of instruction is Igbo, the Igbo language.
Yeah.
Do you know what the language policy is in Mozambique?
I know that it's mandatory to speak Portuguese from first grade on. There's no kindergartens for public schools in my country. Yeah, only private schools are the ones that provide kindergarten.
And of course, in Nigeria, English is the official language.
Yeah.
French is the second official language.
Yeah, nobody really does
Yes.
that. Yeah.
But the idea that schools use a foreign language is one thing. The other aspect of this is that schools use only one language, clarifying those as two distinct things. One as just using one language. So imagine, for instance, that all the people that gather there, that come from different provinces, and they go to school, and schools say, okay, we're going to accommodate all the languages that students bring to the school. Just like in the US, you have bilingual programs. You can have English, Spanish bilingual program and so forth. Imagine that schools were to try to do that. I don't think that that's the case. Like, schools just use Portuguese.
They just use Portuguese.
Yes. Why wouldn't schools do that? That is, use all these languages that students are bringing with them to the school. Why force them to use just one language?
In Abuja especially, you will have to learn a second or third language. In the most schools that I went to, I either had to take like an Igbo class or Hausa. I did not learn anything from those classes. I can't. Yeah. But like you still had to take those classes as well. And then also French is like probably for every school, like you have to take that as a second language as well.
But did you use any of those languages to learn any other subject?
No, that's the thing. Yeah, we did not use those languages to learn any of these subjects apart from French school.
What would happen if all subjects are taught using those different languages? Is that feasible?
I don't think it would be feasible. Maybe one of the reasons why my country decided to keep Portuguese as the main language was probably due because of that, because of so many languages that are within the country, and they just saw that it would be easy for the government to manage the educational system by having only one single language.
I think that too. I think there are too many languages to just have one in the whole country, even within a state. I feel like that is I feel like just to have one tribal language. There are too many different tribes in one state. Just choose one tribal language to teach everybody.
And of course, if you have to select one indigenous language,
I guess either
you have to figure out which one are you
Which
going
one
to
you
use,
can- yeah.
right?
and then that's another issue.
And I think that could, for your case, I think that would bring a lot of social issues,
Yeah.
especially between tribes.
Tribe, yeah.